has touched Tel Aviv, and Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has in fact backed Trump's peace plan with regard to Gaza, and has said that the United States have in fact given enough and more pressure to ensure that Hamas in fact responds, and that is why the hostage exchange has in fact taken place. 7 hostages have been released as we in fact speak. As part of the standard protocol, we did see them being taken to the hospital. These are in fact visuals of when Trump had just landed in Tel Aviv. There we have Kushner as well, Jared Kushner, as well as Witkoff were the ones who were in Tel Aviv and speaking with the Israeli leadership to ensure the implementation of the Gaza peace plan. These are in fact live visuals coming in from Tel Aviv as Trump is expected to deboard from the Air Force One in a few minutes. This visual in fact coming in from the Tel Aviv airport, where Trump had said that just after the information had come in that the Gaza peace deal is going to go through, Trump had said that he would be coming to the West Asian region and also speak with the leadership there. Kushner and Witkoff also present in the Middle East. Both of them are the ones who were representing Trump's peace plan to the Israelis. Netanyahu did thank both of them as well. And here we can see Netanyahu there, along with the top leadership of Israel to receive Trump. The red carpet has been rolled on, and all of them waiting the President of the United States to deboard from the plane. A big day for the situation in Gaza. In fact, we have Ambassador Veena Sikri who is joining us on the phone line. Ambassador, it's been almost 2 years, a lot of fighting, a lot of back-channel talks, something concrete happening on the ground in Gaza, exchange of hostages finally. But do you think that the peace is going to hold?
Well, this is the very important first step, I would say very important first step, which is the release of hostages. At the moment, only one batch of 7 hostages has been released, and the second batch of another about, I think, 13 hostages is yet to be released. And then, of course, people are waiting for the bodies of the hostages who have died while they were in custody. So this is the first part of the agreement, and I think that President Trump has just landed for the start of the summit. But in the summit, Hamas is not taking part, and Israel is not there in the summit. So I think that at the moment, it shows that the final contours of the peace deal are by no means certain, because the next stage where Hamas is to give up on its plans for governance in Gaza, its plans for its presence in Gaza, all those are huge uncertainties. And there are reports from Gaza that the Hamas called in its 7,000 of its members, and they are there on the streets either in civilian clothes or in the uniforms, the blue uniforms of the Gaza police. So there are a lot of uncertain questions as we go ahead, but certainly this first step of the release of the hostages is something that the waiting for a very long time. This is a positive sign.
Well, Ambassador, how do you in fact see the role of President Trump? In fact, Trump, just when the information came that the Gaza deal could be through, the first phase of it could be, going through, you had the President Trump in fact reacting to it and saying that he's going to the Middle East, he's going to West Asia, Asian region. But what do you, is there something concrete that's going to come out from Sharm el-Sheikh when he in fact meets with some of the European leaders there? Because most of his allies have gone ahead and recognized Palestine, and they are pushing for the two-state solution, but Israel isn't in fact going to compromise on that.
Yes, as I said, that there are a huge amount of uncertainties ahead, but I think that President Trump has gone there to celebrate the first stage of this deal, where the return of the hostages is a very important first step. But I think there are an enormous number of uncertainties ahead in the management of the whole Gaza. And as you said quite correctly, the very aspect of the two-state solution, which has been accepted by India, by a lot of the world community, the Western countries, and of course by the UN in toto, is not yet accepted by Israel. So that itself is another major block in what is termed as the Gaza peace deal or the Middle East peace deal, because you cannot have a return to normalcy unless this happens. And the question of having a, the second stage where you have a peace board headed by President Trump running the Gaza administration and so on, we don't know how that is going to take place. But I think that the presence of President Trump in West Asia and then in Sharm el-Sheikh will President Trump is hoping he will give a big boost to the second stage and get the support of his Western allies for the second stage. So I think that it is an important, successful first point for the return of the hostages. Very, very crucial, very, very important, and good news for all the families of the hostages who are returning alive and well. But still a lot of uncertainty ahead as the peace deal unfolds and as the implementation moves ahead.
Well, also, Ambassador, now we have seen the core cause for the Israelis have been trying to free the hostages. So most of the time, the military incursions into Gaza have been based on that. Now, with the hostages returned, do you think that cause for moving into Gaza has been taken away? And also at the same time, do you think Israel is going to accept any kind of an international force to keep peace in Gaza?
But that is the whole point. In the peace deal, before you have an international force, you have, the peace board, which is going to control the situation in Gaza. That has to be formed. And then there is no reference or indication of how the Palestinians will be involved in that process. And this is what has caused a lot of discomfort in many countries. Although our Prime Minister has welcomed the peace deal. He has telephoned President Trump and welcomed the peace deal and said that it's an important first step. It is indeed an important first step. But the next stage about how the Palestinians will be involved in the running of the Gaza and the two-state solution, that is the critical factor that the Palestinians and the countries of the Middle East have been waiting for. So how these will happen is not yet sure. But certainly we have India and Prime Minister Modi, we have all welcomed the peace deal as a significant movement and a significant step forward to end the hostilities. That is the critical part, that if the hostilities now end, but there was talk that Israel wants to keep control of a strip of Gaza and so on, all that has to be worked out. But if the hostilities end now, both from Israel and Hamas side, then that becomes the next step to moving ahead on the peace board and moving ahead on administration of Gaza by the Palestinians and so on.
Well, also, Ambassador, how much keenly should India watch these developments that is happening in West Asia? Of course, Israel has been a key ally when it comes to our defense and our diplomacy at a point, but we also have ties with the rest of the Gulf nations and even Iran. So how much we should in fact focus when it comes to us keeping an eye on the situation in West Asia?
Well, we are very deeply interested, and our Prime Minister's telephone call is an indication of how deeply we are interested. But we have committed to a two-state solution, and that's something that we are committed to, and we committed to it long back. We have very good relations with the people of Palestine, and we know that Yasser Arafat, when he used to come to India, even received the Jawaharlal Nehru Peace Prize. So we are committed to a two-state solution. That is a very important part. We have good relations with Israel, but at the same time we want a cessation of hostilities, that the hostilities should end and the contours of the two-state solution should emerge now. So that is the critical part, and I'm sure that Israel and USA and all the other countries are equally looking forward to this critical stage, because if this doesn't come about, then you cannot have a return to peace in Gaza, because you don't know if as the Hamas has outside that he leaves the Gaza or that is not to be involved in the administration of Gaza. All this they have refused, but it has moved out to the second stage of the peaceful of the negotiations for the Gaza peace deal. So I think that we have to just abide our time, welcome the first stage, and look forward to the completion, which is ultimately in a two-state solution. But the process towards a two-state solution has to involve the people of Palestine and to make sure that it is peaceful and no resumption of hostilities again. This is the important part. So we will see and watch how this happens.
Well, Ambassador Steve, with us, President Trump has just deplaned, and he is now having a word with Netanyahu and the Israeli leaders as well. Netanyahu also receiving him at the Tel Aviv airport. Trump flanked by Israeli leaders as well as his advisors, having a word with Netanyahu as he in fact deplanes from his Air Force One. Also, there is Kushner as well as Witkoff, both of them who have been Trump's representatives in Israel, having engaged with the Israeli parliament as well as with the leadership in Israel over the Gaza peace plan. Trump, in fact, having a word again with several of them over there. Well, Ambassador, another big question that has emerged from this entire peace plan as it's going on, it's kind of, a forced kind of a peace plan, because Trump started off with the warning that if you don't agree, he warns Hamas that if you don't agree with this, you are going to face the consequences. So he puts it out in the open that they would, in fact, have to pay the price if they don't agree with this 20-point plan. So it starts with a threat, and then it seems to have also, interestingly, some of the Israeli commentators were saying that we are not speaking directly with Hamas. We are letting the United States speak with Qatar, and they are the ones who are looking into whatever is happening on the ground. So it's been kind of indirect talks across the board.
Yes, that's true, and that's the reason why neither Hamas is going to be present at the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, nor is Israel going to be present at the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I think this is an indication of a peace plan that has been evolved. Of course, ultimately, it depends on how much Israel is going to respect its no violence from now on pledge, now that the hostages are being returned. But at the same time, from the Palestinian side, you have the demand for inclusion in the peace settlement and inclusion in the administration of Gaza and so on. So these are important issues there, and there are problems within Gaza as well. For example, today we heard that violence has broken out between Hamas and the representatives of the Dugmash family, which is an internal clash, internal to Gaza and to the situation in Gaza. So the situation is not easy, but again, as the first step of the Gaza peace plan, if the hostages are fully returned, all the 20s who are still alive and the others who have lost their lives, then it will be an important closure for the people of Israel. And I think based on this important closure for the people of Israel, they should be ready for a second stage which will lead to permanent peace and the two-state solution that the rest of the world is looking for. And in that, the acquiescence and acceptance of the people of Israel is very important, and the commitment of Hamas is also very important. So that's going to be much more difficult and complicated, but the commitment is there for getting to that second stage, and maybe the outline, the contours, the outcome of the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh will give us an indication how that is going to work out.
Also, when you look at the larger map of West Asia, this conflict has shaped the entire dynamics of West Asia. We've seen countries being sucked into this, from Iran's proxies to the Middle East in larger sense when missiles were launched from Iran. But interestingly enough, in all this, the geopolitical elephant in the room, Iran, is not being pictured in this entire negotiation. Or is it that they are being put into it only through back-channel talks?
I think Iran is maintaining a very low profile. We know that, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and the Houthis, the three groups, did benefit from Iranian support. And these groups, at least the Hezbollah and the Hamas, are very much on the back foot now. And that is a big problem. That is, a situation for Iran, which is, I would say it's putting them in this very low-profile situation right now. But it is true also that one of the biggest issues in the entire 2 years of the Israeli-Hamas conflict has been this: an end to terrorism, an end to violence. and Hamas recognized as a terrorist group. The question is that can we bring an end to the activities of these violent terrorist groups? Because if that is achieved, then you can certainly look forward to a long-lasting peace in the Middle East. But all the recognized terrorist groups, whether it's the Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, all of them, end to the violence, end to their terrorist activities. This is a very important part. And equally, another important part is to get a two-state solution for Palestine, where Israel and Palestine will live in peace next to each other. So I think these two aspects have to go hand in hand. There has to be a steady work ahead for the end to the activities of the violent terrorist groups, and moving towards a two-state solution where Israel and Palestine will live side by side in peace and harmony. So in this, it also depends how much the other countries who have been supporting the Hamas, the Hezbollah and the Houthis, countries like Iran, what their acceptance and reaction to this is. We do not have any indication of that yet, but let us wait and see.
In fact, thank you, Ambassador Veena Sikri, former Indian diplomat, who in fact has given us the perspective of that entire tinderbox called West Asia. We are also joined in by Eli Pebbs, the Director, International Relations, Israel Defense and Security Forum. Eli, the person who has been pushing for that peace plan, he's landed in Tel Aviv. The Israeli top leadership is there to welcome him. What further from there? What are we going to in fact see? What is that one guarantee that you expect Trump to give at your parliament that you would say that yes, finally this war is over?
I don't know if there's any word that President Trump can say other than his presence being here at the time that the hostages are returning. I'm speaking to you right now from the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli Parliament, where President Trump will be speaking in about an hour or so. We're all awaiting him, and there was a sense of anticipation, there's a sense of excitement, there's a sense of celebration. The idea that we're getting all of our hostages back, the ones who are alive, 20 hostages back today all at once, was something that was seen as absolutely impossible, not even something that we thought we could even dream of. And the hope that we are now going to see something go beyond the hostages returning and see some sort of transformational peace is something that I think I don't expect President Trump to have a word that's going to be something that's going to be convincing. It's the sense here in Israel that we are committed to enforcing a peace. And what do I mean by that? We have a ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is still trying to attack us. Right now, the Lebanese army is doing a very good job of trying to disarm them. And when they need help, Israel is going ahead and continuing to disable Hezbollah. I expect we'll see a similar dynamic with Hamas. In Gaza, Hamas continues to want to destroy us. They're willing to do this deal because holding on to the hostages is becoming more and more difficult politically for them. It's creating friction between America and Qatar, and we're moving to a new situation where Israel and the U.S. are really working in tandem to try to soothe the Middle East. Will it happen at one moment, like we're seeing today? I don't know. I don't expect there is going to be a climax moment like we're experiencing today when it comes to a peace in the Middle East. But I think we are very far and well ahead and heading in that direction. And I wouldn't underestimate the power of what Netanyahu and Trump can do. We saw what they did 5 years ago with the Abraham Accords, and that has survived 2 years of war with Hamas and with, frankly, all Iranian proxies. If that peace was as durable as that, something that I didn't believe, I expect that what will come out of this situation, of this new potential in the Middle East, I think much of the Middle East is petrified of the jihadi network, of the Iranian proxies. They want to see Israel stronger, and I think you'll see more and more countries lining up, whether directly to normalize relations with Israel. That probably won't happen immediately, but you can see already elements happening, overtures that are being made. Even the conversation I've here with colleagues waiting for the president to arrive. I've had lots of discussions with countries that Israel doesn't have relations with, all anticipation of a new Middle East.
Well, so we are joined in now by Major Dan Pfefferman, founder of ME24 and former IDF officer who's also joining us. Major, how do you in fact see the military objectives of the IDF in the last 2 years, whether it's achieved everything that it's set out for, and at the same time, has it established Israel as the preeminent military power in West Asia? I think you're on mute. Could you unmute yourself?
Yes, better?
Yeah, yes.
The military objectives were broadly met, and in the fact that they severely weakened Hamas as a credible fighting force, as a force that can launch terrorist attacks, that can wage any kind of protracted guerrilla warfare. However, the whole point of a military action is to lead to some kind of diplomatic action. Hamas is a radical entity that does not play by the same rules as rational actors, as rational states. And so the whole point was to push it, to bend it, to pressure it to the point where it was finally be willing to come to the table and agree to a reasonable package, a reasonable diplomatic package, and that is essentially what has happened here.
All right.
The military pressure was strong enough to force it to agree to this. The hard step is going to be now, and we're already seeing signs that Hamas is not going to give up power in Gaza. It's not going to, step down. It's not going to disarm. And so you're going to need a whole nother series of diplomatic and military moves, economic pressure, regional pressure in order to get Hamas to, and essentially to pressure Hamas to play along with the Trump plan.
Well, Major, in India we deal with something called as the non-state actors, and probably Hamas is also a kind of a non-state actor. They are malleable in the sense that they can move from having territory, not having territory, and also the kind of internal politics that would happen within an organization that would define its kind of approach it has with a state like Israel. So dealing with non-state entities like the Houthis, we are dealing with the Hezbollah and with Hamas at the same time. Over the last 2 years, and now finally the release of the hostages, that has been one of the objectives of Israel. How difficult that has been to actually fight between non-state entities that do not have territory and at the same time entities that do have territory. That was largely seen when it came to attacks on Iran.
Right. This is one of the preeminent challenges of our time. Any country, especially a democracy, but any country that's trying to fight asymmetric non-state actors, and then when you add into the mix jihadist actors who have a whole different set of calculations. And so we saw that the capture of all of Gaza was not enough to pressure it. We saw that the destruction of a lot of buildings were not enough to pressure it. We saw that the killing of roughly half, if not more, of Hamas's fighting force, maybe that pressured it a little bit. But their calculations, they're not swayed by the pressure on their population because they use their population as a pawn. They're not there to protect their population. They're there to essentially be, a dictatorship over their population to keep themselves in power. So this is one of the big challenges that we have, and I think you're going to see a lot of countries looking at what Israel didn't do, did right, did wrong over these last 2 years. Because this challenge of non-state or semi-state jihadist actors is just going to continue to be a major challenge for the international community. And the solution, therefore, is also going to be in the international community. And that's why I'm very happy, by the way, to see the way the Trump plan was put together. I'm happy to see that the number of countries that are coming to Egypt for this summit is important because this Hamas attacked Israel. Hamas took Israeli hostages, but Hamas is not just an Israeli problem, and thinking that Israel can change a policy of one sort or another in order to reach some kind of agreement with Hamas is preposterous. Hamas is a jihadist entity with regional aspirations. It's part of Muslim Brotherhood who has global aspirations, and the solution, therefore, is going to have to be in tight cooperation among nation states and especially among democracies.
Also, we have Eli perhaps who continues to be with us. Eli, perhaps the big question a lot of people here when we look in far in Asian region are actually trying to figure out from this part of the world is that has Israel inadvertently entered into a cold war between the Sunni world and the Shia world?
You know, I think right now Israel is focusing on what it needs to do in order to protect itself. Israel obviously is looking to expand its relations and sees itself adhering more to the Sunni world. Whether this is going to go into something much more than that, that's definitely is hard to say. But I think that from an Israeli perspective, right now, there's only one thing that we're thinking about, which is the celebratory aspect of the day, with the potential for a better tomorrow, a tomorrow where Israel is embraced by the world because of the respect that the world has for Israel. And I think we're seeing that despite what some in Europe are looking at Israel in a negative light. I think we're seeing other countries adhering to Israel, and I think we will see that continuing with the foreseeable future.
Well, also, Major Dan Ferferman, this question is for you. When we look at the Middle East and the larger Middle East, when I'm talking about, there are a lot of these pressure groups that are there within these countries. And though the official governments would like to have better relations with Israel, these pressure groups have a siding towards the Palestinian cause, and therefore they have been also trying to derail a lot of Israel's attempts to have normal relations. It's been continuing for almost years together, and how much of a challenge is that now, especially with this conflict in Gaza?
Well, that was essentially the big challenge of the last 2 years. In fact, most of the region's countries actually wanted to see Israel defeat Hamas. They understood Hamas to be a threat to stability. They understood Iran and its proxies to be threats to stability. And the challenge for them is that for decades, they either actively stoked public opinion to be anti-Israel in order to distract or to play along with the radicals, not wanting to take on the radicals, or in the last 2 years, they didn't do enough to counter that. And so it's very hard to overturn public opinion quickly. You saw also the major PR campaigns put on by Hamas, by its backers in Al Jazeera and Qatar, by the Iranians, and the Arab countries didn't do a whole lot to dissuade that. And so you're right, you had 2 years of constant accusations of genocide and of war crimes, etc., things that are going to be quickly found out that were just absolute smear campaigns against Israel. But behind the scenes, these countries continue their relationships with Israel. There's more countries that want to have relationships with Israel because they realize that by and large, and broadly speaking, Israel is a force for stability and prosperity in the region, and that Hamas and Iran and the radical axis are forces of destruction and of chaos in the region. And so they're going to have to figure out a better way to bring their publics along. And this is going to be the challenge, because undoubtedly Hamas or another proxy group is going to use the same playbook. Hamas instigated the October 7th war, we know, in order to torpedo the next round of the Abraham Accords, in order to torpedo peace talks, and they certainly managed to delay it for 2 years and put a strain on Israel's relationships with the region. But behind the scenes, these countries wanted and will want to continue developing relations with Israel, understanding that it is generally in their interest.
Well, Eli, perhaps the other big question is from Europe. A lot of these European countries did realize Palestinian as a state, but do you think that, again, is it because of domestic electoral politics that most of these countries were forced to, in fact, go ahead and give some kind of recognition to Palestine, rather than the actual sort of diplomatic relationship that they want to have with Israel?
I think that there's definitely a good point of what you're making. I would counter that slightly, that I don't want to say they were forced. They opted to do so. There are European countries that had a significant domestic anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, and I'll argue also anti-Semitic that they wanted to address. They didn't address it directly. They didn't directly counter it. They tried to feed it. They tried to placate it, and that never works. You'll notice the countries that have done so are only countries with a fairly left-wing, fairly anti-Israel governments. Macron in France, since he announced that he wanted to recognize Palestine, he's had to find two prime ministers. He's got his tremendous amount of incohesion in his own country, yet he's focusing so much in Israel, something that he's hoping to try to take credit for, which is absolutely nothing that he really gets any credit for. He has all of his activities has only empowered Hamas and has made what Israel is trying to do much more difficult. But Spain, UK, Canada, unfortunately, these are more left-wing governments. The governments that are not left-wing, that are more moderate or that are more center-right, have stayed very firm with Israel, and I think we will see that much. We'll see that much more. We see Germany, we see Italy, we see many countries in Central Europe continuing to stay strong with Israel, despite the fact that even in some of those countries there are significant anti-Israel sentiments. Some of the flotillas that were trying to break Israel's legal blockade of Gaza came from Italy, and yet those governments have stayed strong with Israel. And I expect that more and more countries will continue to stay strong, and even those countries like the UK and France that have been pushing for a Palestinian state against the will of Israel, I think you're going to see very quickly they're going to try to come back and they're going to try to adhere themselves much more to Israel. So the isolation, the sense of isolation that Israel has, I think will evaporate extremely quickly.
All right. Eli, perhaps another thing that I would in fact look at this is that is Israel over-reliant on U.S. guarantee, that their security would be guaranteed by the United States? When will Israel actually be on its own feet, trying to say that they're not dependent on any superpowers, they are a power on their own right and they don't require a superpower to guarantee their existence out there? That is going to be the final point of complete confidence in being a country there, isn't it?
I think if you ask Hamas, you ask Iran, you ask the other Iranian autocracies, can Israel defend itself? I think they could say very affirmatively that Israel not only will defend itself, but will defend itself even when many of its allies is putting significant pressure to prevent Israel from defending itself, to prevent Israel from threatening Israel with embargoes, Israel and sanctions. Despite all of that pressure, Israel continued to fight, fought to the point when America thought it was in their interest to go ahead and attack Iran's nuclear capabilities as well. I think the Middle East understands that Israel is independent. Israel is fighting, even when its enemies its allies tell it not to. And I think that muscle that Israel exercised very forcefully for the first time in this war is one of the reasons why Israel is going to be respected and will be even more respected in the Middle East and throughout Asia and throughout the new parts of the world that has had the stronger relationship with Israel. In Africa, I think we see more and more countries from Africa adhering to Israel. Europeans, yes, they have some of their populations, may make it more difficult to fully embrace Israel, but I think Israel will have a lot more allies than adversaries moving forward.
Well, Major Dan Fofferman, do you think the change from Biden administration to Trump administration did in fact help Israel cause a lot?
Yes, the Biden administration was certainly supportive of Israel, but it oftentimes wavered on doing what is necessary to win these kinds of wars, and that it oftentimes caved into possibly domestic pressure or international pressure. And so what you had from the Trump administration was a much more clear-eyed view of the role of American power, American leadership in the world, and most importantly, a very clear-eyed understanding of what it takes to defeat an entrenched jihadist enemy who built 500 kilometers of tunnels under all of Gaza, who held hostages, who was utilizing its own civilian population in order to pressure Israel, ironically. And so that extra support from the Trump administration, the leadership giving the diplomatic support for Israel to continue waging the war were absolutely critical. And then when the time came, when Hamas was isolated and pressured enough, getting Hamas's backers and allies in the region and the Middle Eastern countries to step up and put the final pressure on Hamas to accept this deal was absolutely critical.
Also, Major Dan Fofferman, one interesting aspect of this entire conflict has been this, that how is it that Hamas had long-range rockets with them, they were able to have such an extensive tunnel system being built in Gaza. We would call it as intelligence failure at many levels in that case. And everyone had to wait for an October 7th to happen to do something about it.
Well, no, we knew that they had the tunnels. We probably didn't know the extent of the tunnels or the mapping of them. We certainly knew they had tens of thousands of medium and long-range rockets here. The problem is we didn't have the international legitimacy to go in and take care of it. And the intelligence failure is that the Israeli intelligence system assumed that Hamas was deterred and would not use those. It wouldn't certainly bring upon itself the destruction that we now see in Gaza. And so that was really the intelligence failure. But the problem is we had 6 or 7 different rounds of fighting, all instigated by Hamas since it took over in 2006, since it took the Gaza Strip from Fatah in 2006. And every time Israel refrained from coming in, from completely taking out Hamas and the threat it posed to Israel, because of international pressure, because of ceasefires, and there was a false thinking in Israel, in the region, in the international community, that Hamas can be appeased, that Hamas can be deterred, that reasonable agreements can be reached. And what we realized, what Israel realized with October 7th, is that Hamas cannot be appeased or reasoned with. The Arab states understand that as well. What is ironic, and back to your previous question with my colleague here, is that the European states don't seem to realize that Hamas cannot be appeased or reasoned with. It is not a rational actor, and so just we knew that they had these weapons. We just didn't have the political will or the reason to go in, because, as you saw, it was incredibly costly for Israeli lives. Hundreds of Israeli soldiers were killed in the process. Thousands were injured. We were in 2 years of wartime economy, isolated from much of the international community. And of course, the damage and destruction to Gaza. Israel doesn't want to see damage and destruction to Palestinian civilians. That was unfortunately the price that had to be paid for Hamas's actions all these years, turning Gaza into a heavily fortified terrorist bunker, essentially.
Right. Eli, perhaps when we look at this particular conflict that's happened in Gaza, do you think, just like all the other battles that Israel has fought, what happened in 1948, in the Yom Kippur War, and so on, this is the first major wound on the Israeli national psyche, which Israel had to address, probably in what we would call of a more stable world?
Well, I mean, certainly Israel is stronger, and it's a war. Every war changes the country. I don't think every war that Israel survived, whether it's 48, 67, 73, Lebanon, etc., it's changed the country. And I don't think the country is ever going to go back to an October 6th mentality. I think there may be differences amongst Israelis of what that pre-October 6th mentality is or was. So I think there certainly will be some challenges. But to Dan's point that he just made, had Israel said on October 6th, 2023, that there was a Hamas, they have an army, they've got a will, they've got weapons, they've got a tunnel infrastructure, and they want to destroy Israel, and Israel would have preemptively tried to do something to stop it, we would have had no legitimacy outside of Israel. And frankly, within Israel, there would have been a lot of calls that we shouldn't have done, that we shouldn't have instigated this. So I think there definitely is a reassessment. And obviously, we're grateful now that we're at this point. Not grateful that October 7th happened, but grateful that we're at this point where the country understands that it needs to take its national security fundamentally differently than how we looked at it pre-October 7th.
All right. The last question, Major Dan Pfefferman. How much has Israel changed after October 7th?
Israel has changed significantly. Today's Israel is not the same Israel as it was two years and a day ago. This is a very different country. This is a country that, if this is a country that has big scars that need healing now. These hostages suffered immensely. Their families suffered immensely. There are hundreds of families of soldiers who were killed in combat. There are thousands and thousands of wounded soldiers who are healing now. But we also understood this is the first really total war that we've had in many, many decades. And if there were any doubts about this generation of Israelis and what they're willing to do for their country, understanding that our security and stability is precarious and that every generation has to rise to the challenge, I think you see here that this is a generation that absolutely rose to the challenge to defend the country, that understands the price that needs to be paid for peace, and that you saw hundreds of thousands of reservist soldiers and professional soldiers and volunteers rise to the occasion. And so this is not a sacrifice or a moment that will be easily forgotten. We're just now starting to digest. Now we can start the healing process of 2 years of this war, of 2 years to this attack, with the hostages finally coming home. And I think the region will actually also be significantly changed because of this war, also for the better. Again, realizing that radical Islamist entities, terrorist entities, semi-state entities cannot be left unchecked because they simply lead to death and destruction in the region. And this is hopefully something that more and more countries will realize.
Right. Stay with us, gentlemen. We slip into a short break now. News and updates will continue on the other side.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9 English News.
Look, this investment guru's tips will double your money. Just claim the offer.
Double your money from any random group. Pay attention. Promising double returns, they'll lure you in tight. Unverified groups will send fake tips overnight, emptying your pockets before you can fight. Well said! Well said! Well said! SEBI and NSE advise, consult only SEBI registered advisors and make payments only to verified accounts or UPI IDs. An investor awareness initiative by SEBI and NSE.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
You can take a left, you can take a right, and it's also all a little time. If you really feel it, say it on price. It's the vibe, it's the vibe, it's the vibe.
This is my temple, this is my mental peace sanctuary. The
ultimate biking experience is incomplete without Servo 40 Extra from Indian Oil. Servo 40 Extra from Indian Oil. Can't do without it.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9 English News as it should be.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching News9 and I'm Sami Kapoor, and we will be getting you all the top stories. And the top stories this hour is that Donald Trump is right now landed in Israel after the announcement of the release of the first batch of hostages. He is set to address the Israeli parliament before heading to Egypt. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood waiting at the airport as the Air Force One taxied in, smiling and talking to the US ambassador. Trump, remember, is only the 4th US president to address the Knesset, following Jimmy Carter in 1979, Bill Clinton in 1994, and George W. Bush in 2008. Israeli President Isaac Herzog will award Trump with Israel's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Honor. And to take this discussion further, to find out the significance of this historic moment, to say, I am joined by Major Dan Fufferman, who's the founder of ME24 and former IDF officer. live from Tel Aviv, Israel. He's also the editor of Middle East 24. Well, thank you so much for taking our time and joining me here at News 9. I'll first come across to you, Major Dan. I have to ask you the significance of this milestone where Donald Trump has managed to arrive at this peace deal between Gaza and Israel. What is going to be the impact on Middle East at large? Because this is going to be a newfound dynamics now. How is this going to impact in the larger picture?
Yeah, first of all, this is a big day in Israel. This is a big day because we're finally getting back the last of our hostages who have been held in absolutely horrendous conditions, subhumanitarian conditions, torture and starvation in tunnels, 50 meters underground with no medical aid, with barely any food for the last 2 years. And their families have been lobbying and going around the world and trying to raise as much attention for this as they can. So to get them back is a very big day for Israeli society, and I think for anyone who really appreciates human life around the world. It also means that the war in Gaza itself, which has been a very destructive war, unfortunately, can come to an end. However, calling this a peace deal, and I understand why it had to be pushed that way. Israel is certainly on board with the Trump peace plan. The problem is Hamas has made it clear that it does not accept the major tenets of this peace plan. And so for it to become an actual peace plan, and perhaps there is one important strategic aim, besides bringing back the hostages, which is important for Israeli society, and it ends the actual war in Gaza. What this does is it recruits the international community, especially the Middle Eastern powers, in order to bring an end to Hamas's control over Gaza. Hamas constantly waging wars against Israel, and Hamas actually torturing and abusing and ruling with an iron fist over the people of Gaza. Hamas is executing without any kind of trial in the public square Gazans as we speak, accused of collaborating with Israel or even just opposing its rule these past 2 years. And so for this to actually become a peace plan, and it has the potential, there is the diplomatic momentum here, there is the regional and international coalition, you're going to need to see the regional powers finally understand that Hamas is not Israel's problem. Hamas is a regional and international problem, and Hamas must be isolated. It must be pressured diplomatically, economically, militarily. It must be disarmed, and it must be removed from power. And then we can have the regional plan that Trump envisaged, which is good for everybody in the region except for Iran and Hamas, basically. And it has the potential to lead to the outbreak of an Abraham Accords 2.0, an expansion of the Accords, to some kind of positive traction on the Israeli-Palestinian track. Again, the key linchpin here is if Hamas is actually disarmed, actually isolated, actually removed from power.
For a minute, do you think that Hamas is going to keep their
relationship? I appreciate the words you spoke relating to the security dialogue, which while we elevate the relationship in areas of critical minerals, energy, AI, and climate, to name a few, will continue. The meeting that our officials had relating to security and law enforcement just a few weeks ago here was very productive, and that dialogue will continue. Both of our governments agree on the importance of those dialogues. Both of our governments agree on the importance of elevating the relationship going further. So this joint statement will discuss our mutual plans for re-engagement. It will inform Canadians and Indians alike that we are collectively committed to advancing this relationship now and in the long term, particularly when it comes to our mutual priorities in the Indo-Pacific. So with that, Dhanyavad, thank you so much again. We look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Wait for them to...
Well, as far as the Canadian finance minister is concerned, she is present over here in the national capital, and that was the initiation of a joint statement that is now going to be put forth between India, where S. Jaishankar is going to be present along with the Canadian finance minister. They are looking forward to the prospect of working together. There are going to be bilateral ties. There's also going to be the trade also that is now going to be seen from a different perspective, with the stronger ties that both India and Canada are working towards. Well, that is what was the initiation of a dialogue between the Indian side, where S. Jaishankar is going to be present. They are going to together put forth a joint declaration, a joint statement very soon, and we will be getting you all those updates shortly. It's time for a quick break. Lots more lined up. Stay tuned.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9 English News.
क्वालिटी पे इतना कॉन्फिडेंस, इसलिए बिरला ओपस एश्योरेंस। एक साल में पेंट को कुछ भी हुआ तो पेंटिंग वापस करके देंगे। रजिस्टर करो birlaopus.com पर।
Alakazam fish disappear. Moonlight.
Smooth, silent, seamless. Sliding systems from headache.
खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
You can take a left, you can take a right, and it's also or a little time. If you really feel it, say it on price. It's the vibe, it's the vibe, it's the vibe.
थोड़ा आराम कर ले।
पर कहाँ रुकेंगे?
मैं बताऊं, इंडियन ऑयल स्वागत पेट्रोल पंप। स्वागत है हैप्पी जर्नी की रेसिपी।
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9 English News as it should be.
Welcome back. Now, the United States President Donald Trump has landed in Israel shortly after the announcement of the release of the first batch of hostages. He will address the Israeli parliament before heading to Egypt. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood waiting at the airport as Air Force One taxied in, smiling and talking with the U.S. ambassador. Trump is only the 4th U.S. president to address the Knesset, following Jimmy Carter in 1979, Bill Clinton in 1994, and George W. Bush in 2008. Israeli President Isaac Herzog will accord Donald Trump with Israel's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Honor. Those are the first visuals on your screens right now as Donald Trump landed in Israel. He is being greeted and welcomed by the delegation from the Israel government. And to discuss this further, I'm joined by Major Dan Pfefferment, who is the founder of ME24 and the former IDF officer, who's joining us live from Tel Aviv. And he's also the editor of Middle East to 24. Well, thank you, Major Pfefferment, for continuing to be with us and sharing your views and perspective. I was asking you that whether we can trust Hamas to keep their side of the bargain. Are they going to uphold the commitment when it comes to peace ties that can have, that does have the potential to become a deal? But what exactly could have motivated Hamas to agree to this? Major Pfefferman?
Sure. No, we cannot trust Hamas to agree to this, and they're actually not agreeing to it. So they agreed to release finally these last 20 hostages and the remains of another roughly 30 deceased hostages that they had held these last 2 years. However, the additional points of the Trump plan include Hamas relinquishing power in the Gaza Strip, leaving Palestinian politics, disarming, and Hamas has absolutely said it does not agree to any of these things. Even as we speak right now, Hamas militants have been hiding, in the tunnels and wearing civilian clothes and avoiding actual combat with Israeli troops, are coming out now and executing Palestinians, Gazans who are suspected of having either cooperated with Israel or opposed Hamas rule. And it's making it clear it is not interested in any kind of peace. And so for actual regional peace to prevail here, you're going to need to see a concerted effort by this international force, whoever it comprises of, by the regional powers, of course, by the United States, hopefully with diplomatic backing from the Europeans, in order to actually bring about the disarmament and removal of power from Hamas. They are an impediment to peace. They do not agree to any of the long-term points. And to your second question, what brought about this moment is the fact that all of Hamas's backers in the region are, Hezbollah to the north has been basically defeated and accepted surrender terms. Assad in Syria fled and has been defeated. The Iranians have been weakened badly. The Houthis have been weakened badly. And Hamas's financial and diplomatic patrons in Qatar and in Turkey were basically pressured by the United States government to finally pressure Hamas to end this war, to agree to some kinds of terms. But so it was a mix of Israel's successful military campaign and very smartly used diplomatic pressure by the Americans to bring about this, Hamas accepting these terms and agreeing to end this war. However, for the actual war and for regional developments to take place, you're going to need to see concerted, consistent, ongoing, long-term diplomatic, financial, and even military pressure on Hamas. You're going to have to see Hamas disarmed. You're going to have to see Hamas actually removed from power. And unless that happens, we're going to be back to square one in another 2 years or 3 years or 5 years when Hamas feels that it can rearm and launch more attacks.
Absolutely. And for that, Major Fulfillment, how important would it be for the international community to continue their efforts to ensure that this region is going to have a sustained peace process? And what steps should the international community take in that direction to ensure that?
So first of all, how do you, ensure that Hamas is actually disarmed here? What is the mechanism? You're going to need boots on the ground. And if you want Israel to leave Gaza, you're going to have a force on the ground that is actually capable and willing to confront Hamas, to round up weapons, to arrest militants who refuse to disarm. You're going to need a viable mechanism that includes possibly a reformed Palestinian Authority, and you're going to need strong international oversight and shepherding of this entire process. Even the non-Hamas Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority and the Fatah, have not especially shown that they are committed to peace with Israel, and they're quite corrupt and inept institutions and organizations. And so in order to see an actual transformation, you're going to need international involvement, not just to pressure Israel, which is where the world always seems to be focused, but to pressure the Palestinians, to force actual reform and change, to hold them to a higher standard of accountability, something we almost never see in the Palestinian areas, and to get them to fundamentally de-radicalize their society. The education system is horribly radicalized against Israel. It is anti-Semitic, it is anti-Israel, it is anti-West, it is not democratic, and you're going to need to see a lot of deep structural changes, and it's the new regional alliances that hopefully are going to be able to push these kinds of changes through. If the region takes its eye off the ball, forgets that this is a long-term process, then Hamas will just find its way back to power and find ways to enslave the Gazan population, to continue radicalization, to continue launching terrorist attacks against Israel, to continue inciting political unrest in the West Bank. And we're going to be back to square one in a number of years if we don't see this consistent effort by the regional powers, the U.S., the international community.
Absolutely. These are the specific steps that would be required to ensure that this peace deal, this peace process is going to be long lasting. I have to ask you, Major Fafament, about Donald Trump's contribution, his intervention, and how he has been instrumental as far as bringing about this ceasefire and the peace is concerned, with constant conversations with the leaders from both sides. Now, of course, he's going to be accorded Israel's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Honor. Would this have happened without Donald Trump's intervention?
I don't know if it would have. You need a leader of the magnitude of President Trump. He's certainly deserving of this award he'll get in Israel. He should be getting a Nobel Peace Prize for all his efforts. He should have gotten a Nobel Peace Prize for brokering the Abraham Accords 5 years ago. American power is, or international power, a country's power is only so good as you're willing to use it. And so for the U.S. to finally use that power and that pressure on the Qataris and on the Turks, the only countries that can bring Hamas to the table, to finally pressure the international actors to condemn Hamas, something that took them almost 2 years to do, but they finally did it. To finally, to keep the European powers in check with their horribly naive moves of trying to recognize a Palestinian state. I'm not sure what even that means, or who's going to run it, or where it's going to be. And Israel, of course, is not recognizing it. And to give Israel the military breathing space in order to do what it needed to do on the ground in order for these diplomatic conditions to come about. You need leadership. You need someone who's willing to bring together allies, to stand up to adversaries, and to not be afraid of political opponents. And Trump certainly seems to be the only one on a world stage who could have done this today.
And we are looking at those visuals on our screens right now, where he was received with much pomp and fanfare, and in expected lines. There is definitely a sense of jubilation and celebration over there in honor of Donald Trump, and we can't take that away from him. But I have to ask you, Major Fafament, what humanitarian steps should be ensured to what humanitarian steps should be taken to ensure that there is aid and help that should reach those in Gaza, because now, of course, the borders have opened up. Now, of course, the dynamics are different. So what should be the steps taken as far as humanitarian aid is concerned that many of those in Gaza were deprived of until now?
Well, first of all, Israel, with very small exceptions, never prevented aid from coming into Gaza. It was the UN that was preventing aid coming from into Gaza because they didn't want to cooperate with Israel and with the GHF mechanism. The entire point this entire time was that Hamas was hijacking and looting the international aid in order to pressure Israel by creating what appeared to be starvation or malnutrition of the Palestinian population. It was then selling back that aid to the Palestinian civilians at 10 times the price of what.
Why I had to interject, Major Fafament. We are going to continue with our focus on Donald Trump in Israel. But right now, let us cut across to the press conference being held by the BJP in West Bengal.
पैरों से हटा दिया। ये लालू यादव जी, ये कांग्रेस पार्टी के लोग आज दलित हितैषी होने का जो ढोंग कर रहे हैं, जो नाटक कर रहे हैं, उनको आत्ममंथन करने की आवश्यकता है। कर्नाटक में दलित समाज के कल्याण के लिए पैसे आते हैं, ट्रांसफर कहां हो जाता है? खड़गे जी के प्राइवेट ट्रस्ट में। आज कांग्रेस पार्टी का शासन कर्नाटक में है, दलितों की हत्या हो, दलितों के साथ अन्याय हो, कांग्रेस पार्टी शांत। पश्चिम बंगाल में उनके साथी की सरकार है, वहां पे दलितों पे आक्रमण हो, कांग्रेस पार्टी शांत। बिहार में उनके पार्टी के, उनके संगठन के, उनके गठबंधन के लोग दुस्साहस करे, अपमानित करे, कांग्रेस पार्टी शांत। ये देश का दलित, देश का वंचित, देश का शोषित और देश का पीड़ित समझ गया है। कांग्रेस का असल चाल, चेहरा और चरित्र दलित विरोधी है, वंचित विरोधी है। मैं यहां तक कहता हूं दैट दे आर द न्यू फ्यूडल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। ये नव सामंतवाद का प्रतीक है कांग्रेस पार्टी का जो नया है। और वहीं दूसरी तरफ आप हमसे सवाल करते हैं, आप बीजेपी और संघ से पूछते हैं। मैं बताना चाहता हूं कि देश के इतिहास में पहली बार संविधान के सर्वोच्च स्थान पर आदिवासी की बेटी को जाने का मौका मिला तो भारतीय जनता पार्टी में मिलता है। पहली बार बाबा साहेब अंबेडकर के बाद केंद्र में कानून मंत्री कोई बनता है, दलित समाज के मेघवाल जी तो अब बनते हैं। आज मंत्री परिषद हो, पद्म सम्मान हो, पार्टी का संगठन हो, विश्वविद्यालय हो, न्यायालय हो, सचिवालय हो, मंदिर के ट्रस्ट हो, राम जन्मभूमि तीर्थ क्षेत्र न्यास में दलित समाज का व्यक्ति परमानेंट सदस्य रहे, यह हमारी सरकार ने सुनिश्चित किया है। तो मुझे लगता है कि कांग्रेस पार्टी, राहुल जी, प्रियंका जी, खड़गे जी दलितों पे एक शब्द बोलने से पहले, दलितों पे एक शब्द ट्वीट करने से पहले, कुछ पोस्ट करने से पहले आत्म मंथन करिए। ये दलित विरोधी, नव सामंती, गरीब विरोधी चेहरा आपका आज देश के सामने उजागर हो गया। धन्यवाद साथियों, आपके मन में कुछ प्रश्न हो तो ले सकते हैं।
Been trying to mount the attack on Lalu Prasad Yadav and his family, and this is after Lalu Prasad Yadav and his family were charged with the scam pertaining to money laundering when it came to the IRCTC scam. Lalu Prasad Yadav, his wife Rabri Devi, and also his son, as the court framed charges against Lalu, Rabri and Tejasvi. BJP has been maintaining that it is the Yadav family that is mired in corruption, and Lalu Prasad Yadav's term as the chief minister in Bihar is synonymous with Jungle Raj, which cannot be forgotten. Remember, the case coming in right now, the framing of charges by the court coming in ahead of the Bihar election is bound to have an impact on the assembly elections and the fortunes of RJD. Let's listen into the reaction coming in from RJD.
केस जो है हम लोग आगे लड़ेंगे, और आप सब लोग जानते हैं कि भाई हम तो पहले कई दिनों से कह रहे थे कि अब चुनाव आया है तो इस तरह की चीज़ें होंगी, लेकिन फिर भी न्यायालय का हम लोग सम्मान करते हुए हम बस इतना ही कहना चाहते हैं कि हम लोग हमेशा से लड़ते आए हैं और आगे भी लड़ेंगे, और तूफानों से लड़ने में मज़ा ही कुछ और है। हम सब लोग, पूरी बात खत्म हो जाने दो, और हम हमेशा अपने पथ को चुना है, संघर्ष के पथ को चुना है। हम अच्छे मुसाफिर भी बनेंगे और मंजिल पर भी पहुंचेंगे। तो इस पे हमको लगता है ज़्यादा बोलने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। बिहार की जनता समझदार है और वो जानती है।
And with that, we're slipping into a short break right now. Lots more lined up. Stay tuned.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9, English news as it. That goat is long dead, but Cyrus Bhai are still alive. Game show. This is God's office calling. You're not a VIP, so God won't speak directly, but here's the deal. You have been granted a second chance with a brand new news show.
Thank you very much. Just one thing. You said 2 lives, 2 more lives. So I'll first be a newsman who wins awards, and second I'll be
cockroach.
Better make this show last. No hurry to, be a cockroach. Let's stay here for a little while. Don't want to be a cockroach. Apparently, they have lots of issues, like being stamped upon. It's the same thing as a newsman. I mean, they're not that different.
Every brand tells a story. And they are the storytellers. The Sutradhars. They present a brand with band, baja and barat to you. They are the Brandwalas.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
Welcome back. The Supreme Court has ordered a CBI investigation into the Karur stampede, and in its order on a series of petitions seeking an independent investigation into the Karur stampede that claimed 41 lives last month. CBI investigation to be monitored by Supreme Court Justice Ajay Rastogi. The probe committee will include 2 IPS officers not below the rank of IG and may be from the Tamil Nadu cadre but not natives of the state. The top court also questioned why a single judge of the Madras High Court's Chennai bench, who had earlier denied a CBI investigation, took cognizance of the case and passed an order calling the stampede an incident that shook the nation. During the last hearing, the Apex Court had questioned the Madras High Court for constituting a special investigation team or an SIT to probe the incident, asking how a single judge could proceed with the matter when a division bench was already seized of it.
Long, detailed hearing by the judges, Justice Maheshwari and Justice Anjaria have been extremely careful and given a very well-reasoned judgment. They took the time to pronounce it in great detail, even in court today. I think all the parties have been heard very well, and we've got an order which we are very happy with, because after all it has been an unspeakable tragedy, and all we want is an impartial, supervised investigation where nobody can be prematurely judged in this situation.
Now, this comes that the Supreme Court has ordered a CBI investigation into the Karur stampede, and this investigation has been ordered after a series of petitions and requests for an independent investigation was made before the court for the Karur stampede that claimed 41 lives last month. Now, the suicide case of Haryana's IPS officer Y. Puran